messy, catastrophic, dire, destructive. This is often the reality for many communities in the aftermath of a disaster. Disasters disrupt communities. They destroy homes, wash away roads, disrupt routines, disrupt businesses, cause disorder, and ultimately can take lives. And we know about this. We hear about it all the time in the news. Think about Haiti, Thailand, China, Myanmar, Pakistan, Turkey, even here in the US, a string of destructive storms. Katrina, Irene, and Sandy, to name a few. Over 255 million people are affected by natural disasters per year. It's a pretty big number. And if we go back to 2010, the numbers are staggering. Over 200 million people were affected. Of those, 270,000 people were killed, and it caused over $110 billion in damages. But 2010 for me was also the year that I decided to focus my passion for clean drinking water into my own job. And I founded DayOne Response, and it's focused just on that, to provide clean drinking water immediately on day one. And it was also at this time that I started to see the other side of disasters: survival, collaboration, empowerment, rebuilding. And I think one of the most common threads is resiliency. Resiliency of the individual, resiliency of families, resiliency of communities, and building too, resiliency of nations. When given the opportunity to survive, resiliency powers through. But what is resiliency? What does that mean? And when I was thinking about this talk, a book was recommended to me called Resilience, and it's a new book. And the authors Zoli and Healy, they define resilience as the capacity for a person, a system, or an enterprise to maintain core purpose and core integrity in the midst of a catastrophic event or catastrophic change in circumstances. So core integrity and core purpose. Are you resilient? I was asking myself that, and I think that through my own personal experience and growing up and leading me to actually starting DayOne Response has built inside of me some of those values, some of the maintaining my core purpose, and through my own personal crises. Nothing like a natural disaster, but my own crises to myself. And I want to share that story with you today, and then also from leading to DayOne Response, stories of 3 individuals that I have had the great opportunity to meet who have survived some pretty catastrophic disasters, such as Katrina in Haiti and then recently Sandy. So the first memory that I have of personal crisis was at the age of 7. I think 7 and 8 is a common theme today. And I was living in Arizona with my family, and my parents sat me down and they said, "Okay, Trish, we're moving to South Korea for the 2nd time." I said, "I'm not going to discuss it. There's no way I'm going with you. How could you take me away from my friends, the comfort of my home in the US? I'm not doing it." But at the age of 7, I didn't have the upper hand in making that decision. So I was off to Korea the 2nd time. And I didn't know that the next 4 years of my life were really going to build a foundation of what I think resilience is. And it really was embodied by my own parents, particularly my mother. And she was kind of the stronghold of our family during that time. And there was some pretty terrifying events for us in Korea, and terrifying at that young age. And we were playing in a park, and there was some tear gas bombings, and we had to get out of there. And we also had to evacuate the country due to some political turmoil and leave my dad behind to continue working. And those were pretty traumatic for me. But my mom maintained her core purpose, her core integrity to be a strong mom for our family. And again, I think that's really, to me, a true example of resiliency. So we did get to enjoy Korea. This is my brother and I. And I think from that point, I learned about, there's like 3 things I took from that. Adapting to the circumstances, really being aware of the world around you, and fully committing to the present. And I want to talk about those 3 things. So adapting. So if I move forward and get to high school, I was all about sports. I was a 3-sport athlete. I wanted to compete collegiately, and that's all I was focused on. But during that time, I was diagnosed with vocal cord dysfunction. Not a life-threatening diagnosis by any means, but a threat to my dreams. I realized that I was never going to be able to compete at the level that I wanted to. But I didn't want to have that hold me back and have me sit on the sidelines of life. I knew that there had to be some other gifts that I had to offer myself and to offer the world. And so I decided to really become aware of the world around me and how could I be a part of this. And so that's me running, but I still run, but not competitively. And so taking the awareness of the world, and I think, again, going back to Korea, at that young age, I saw some things that still haunt me to today. Moms and kids, men without arms or legs in subway stations begging for food and money to survive. And those images still stick with me, and I think that really inspired me to decide to pursue engineering for my education, and primarily pursuing engineering to help disadvantaged communities. And I studied at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, and I co-founded a local organization there called Engineers Without Borders. And it's an opportunity for students and professionals to partner with international communities to work on basic need type solutions. So you think water, sanitation, infrastructure. And I was with my team up in the hill tribes of Thailand, and after working there for about 3 weeks, we sat together around a fire and said, are we really making an impact on the community here? We're foreigners. How do we know the right answer? And our mentor at the time, he said something that's really stuck with me. And he said that engineers who focus on systems, such as water systems and sanitation facilities, have the potential to save more lives and prevent more illnesses than the entire medical profession alone. Save lives and prevent illnesses. I was really hooked. I didn't know if that was possible, but I was hooked. And we were able to do that we were able to provide clean drinking water for a local school up in the hill tribes, and that started to really get me going about what could clean water do for people. And I decided brings me to this next point of committing to the present. I decided to pursue further education, and I got my master's in civil and environmental engineering. And I focused on designing and developing the technology that is the main water technology for DayOne Response, the DayOne water bag. And I spent 2 years designing and developing that, proving it out in the lab. But when I was done, I graduated and went to go get a job, accepted an offer here in San Francisco. And it was right at the beginning of 2009 when the economy was on a downturn. And a month before I started, the offer was rescinded. Within an economic crisis, I had another personal crisis. How could this happen to me? I focused what I felt like was my whole life on trying to get to this point, and I was back to square one. And it took me about 6 months to kind of get over it and realize that there's going to be other opportunities, but it also took me 6 months to realize that there was something sitting there in front of me that I needed to fully commit to, and that was the technology, the DayOne water bag technology, that I had created something that could save lives, that could prevent diseases, and what was I doing about it? And so that led me to DayOne Response. And now I want to share some of the stories of people that I've met along the way, disaster survivors, and I think that they really embody and exemplify what it is to be resilient in the time of crisis. And the first was a survivor from Hurricane Katrina, Julie. I had the opportunity to travel to Bayou La Batre, Alabama, which is a sleepy fishing village along the Gulf Coast. But I traveled there about 1.5 years after Hurricane Katrina. And my team was working on rebuilding there. And Julie was leading our team, and she was a local. And she took us around to some of the devastation there. And this is what it looked like, where you saw homes that were partially standing, or roofs that were blown off, or just foundations, or just stilts. But there wasn't any, nobody was there, and it felt very much like a ghost town. And this is where Julie had lived. This was her community. And she was really overcome by sadness. And she told us a story. She brought us to this place where it was just a foundation, no home. And she said, "My friend used to live here." And she said, "But my friend survived, but we had to move her to another community and get her kids back in school." And you could see that Julie was, this really affected her. But I think through her sadness, I also saw faith and hope that life was going to move on, was going to rebuild, but it might take a little bit of time. And for me, the takeaway from that was resilient communities bend, but they don't break. And so my next experience was traveling to Haiti. And again, it was about a year after the devastating 2010 earthquake, and we were there working with communities on the water technology. And this gentleman here is Dimitri, and he was our translator. And great guy, we were about the same age, so we really connected. And he, in addition to working with us, he also took us around to local communities in Port-au-Prince. And he showed us what life was like. And again, we saw a lot of rubble, destruction, lives that were changed, and people living in makeshift homes and tent cities, and homes that were still standing, but tents that were right next door to the home because people were living in fear that maybe their home would still collapse. And I asked Dimitri, I said, "How could people live like this?" And he told me, he said, "After the earthquake, everybody lost somebody, a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a friend, a neighbor, a cousin. Everybody has lost somebody." But then he followed that up with, "We are a nation of hope." And he pointed around to some of the storekeepers that were working, entrepreneurs themselves, and they were setting up shop. There was rebar that was extruded from a building, and they were setting up their goods to sell their goods. And he said, we've got to get life going. We've got to continue. He said, "We're a resilient people." And he said, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, but we want to live. We want to keep going. And then he also shared, I was really inspired by his own personal story. After the earthquake, Dimitri walked 15 kilometers to the nearest water point to get one water bottle, which is 1 liter of water. And he brought that back to his family, and they shared that. And it's not enough water to even get through a day. And he told me, he said, as we were working together, he said, if I would have had the opportunity to have the water bag, I could have provided my family with many more days of water. And for me, what really inspired me is that DayOne Response, we could be part of this resilient community and movement together. And that really kept me going to know, hey, I want to keep resiliency and disasters, they seem very daunting, but I want to keep going in this. And so now I want to move forward to kind of present day, what's happened in our own country. And I think we're all very familiar with the devastation that Hurricane Sandy has caused. In addition to the U.S., it hit the Caribbean, up into the east coast of the U.S., and also into Canada. And there's a lot of recovery efforts, and there's still a lot of vulnerability and sadness that is still being felt by communities, by our economy, by people. But I want to point out that I think there are some examples of resiliency that have happened that are still going. And this is a photo from New Jersey that this devastation, homes have been wiped out, people's lives have been wiped out. And this next one is I don't know if you can tell, but the brick building is of a shelter, and there's an RV with a generator. And these are actually some friends of mine that were driving cross-country, promoting their own business, and they happened to come to New Jersey during the time of the storm. And so they suspended their campaign and said, hey, we've got power, we've got water bottles, and if you can see it on the back of his bike, and we're going to try to help. So, they're not going to probably save everybody, but they're going to be resourceful and start to work to build the community and help give some hope to some people. This is Lower Manhattan. Power has gone out. And I had an opportunity to speak to a woman, Kelly, who lived in this area. And she said it's very unreal. It's not normally what we see New York as. But she also said that people are sharing power. People are charging their cell phones. These are strangers helping each other. She said, that doesn't happen a lot in New York, but we're working together on this. Also, the reality that people need fuel, people need gas, and how are they going to do that? This is a long line for probably not as much supply that's needed. And that's what happened. There's no gas. So what we're used to, the resources are not there. So what are we going to do? How are we going to work together to be resourceful with what we do have, and strangers helping strangers? And this is another example of triage, of medical professionals working together to save lives. In the midst of all that destruction, they're still working together with the tools and the talents that they have. And I think that's very inspiring, that people still are trying to help whoever they can with the tools and the gifts that they have. And I think that in the midst of any sort of disaster, whether it's own personal one on any magnitude, or a communal disaster or a natural disaster, we have the opportunity to be resilient. And I think if you can think about that, of being, what is your core purpose, and can you maintain that when any sort of shifts or changes happen? And the philosophy at our company, DayOne Response, is that every day is a new day. Every day is day one. So can we work together to rebuild and provide hope for each other? So I hope that today we can remember what is our core integrity and core purpose, and let's be resilient together in whatever we face. And we can do that as individuals, but I think we really can do that as communities. Thank you.